Good afternoon, Mr. Samant and ladies and gentlemen of the board, and thank you for meeting with us here today in your Indian office, headquarters, and for providing us with this opportunity to address your mandate. We are your Terrier Consulting team. Let me introduce Eamon Tatari, Catalina Ruz, Jeffrey Hall-Martin, and myself, Rebecca Fruchter. We are pleased to introduce the main theme of our presentation today, and that is riding the right wave. This is in line with the mandate that you have asked us to address, specifically to recommend a strategy that will provide the best path to take for future growth of Sulip Vineyards over the next 5 years based on the projections provided by Mr. Dansky. Now, in order to do this, we have worked hard to identify and evaluate the following underlying issues. We have to address that there are trade barriers, the capacity that you have reached full capacity recently, your product portfolio, white and red wines, the access to natural resources being very key within this industry, your capital structure, as well as competition. Now let's first have a look at the agenda for today. We're going to start off by providing you with some insights into your position within the industry, as well as have a look at your internal dynamics. We're going to follow through with the alternatives that we have evaluated, as well as our recommendation that is in line with riding that right wave. We will follow through with a detailed implementation plan and wrap up with a conclusion. But let's first have a close look at your industry. Specifically, we're going to look at the political, economic, social, and technological factors that are shaping your industry today. Now, if we start off by having a look at the political environment, there is a decreasing duties on imported wines. Winemaking has become a food processing industry within India. But what we'd like to draw your attention to here is that overall, the industry from a political standpoint is very, very favorable. Specifically, that the government is very supportive of the wine industry and is looking to promote it and expand it as an international recognition. Now, if we move on to the economic factors that are shaping the industry, well, it's a very capital-intensive industry. Production costs on imports are decreasing, but what we'd really like to point out to you here is that the conditions are favorable, but you still must maintain low costs, especially since it is a very capital-intensive industry. We'll discuss a little bit later on about how intensive it is technologically. Now, if we move on to the social aspect, there's rapid acceptance of wine consumption within India. International research has been done, and the government is promoting the health benefits of wine. But what we want to point out here is that the demand is strong, and the government is promoting that strong economy. And in addition to this, there's beneficial aspects to the economy based on providing opportunities for workers within the agricultural field of wine and grape harvesting. Now, moving on to the technological aspect, well, irrigation is extremely important, access to water. There's all kinds of technologies required in order to produce wine. Now, what is important within the industry, therefore, is know-how, understanding how the technology works. Now, based on our assessment of the industry, we have determined that your key success factors within this environment are the following. Image is very important. You need to have those production process and technology in place, distribution, pricing, and of course, marketing, especially now that you have government support in doing so. But now let's take some time to have a close look at the internal dynamics of your firm and what makes you different. We're going to just start off by having a look at wine consumption around the world. As you can see, there's about 60 to 70 liters of consumption per year in India. Now, what we want to point out here is that India is a very growing opportunity for you here, especially since what I've emphasized within the industry assessment, how consumption is really going up. Now, let's just have a look at the value chain. Obviously, you're aware of what your production processes are, but what we'd like to point out here is that the time it takes to produce this wine is critical, especially in terms of your cash flows. The longer it takes, the less product you can get out to the market. And in addition, sales and marketing are key success factors, and this is another part of your value chain that we would like to emphasize. Now, let's have a look at your resources. Obviously, you know what they are. The wine board is critical to your success as well. The state-of-art winery facilities that you have. Now, combine that with the competencies that you have in matching the wine that you have to the palates of the Indian culture, your marketing skills and production efficiencies. This leads to your competitive advantage in know-how and technology. Now, the analysis would not be complete without having a look at the financial health of your company. Before we move on to the options that are available to you, Jeffrey is going to provide you with a picture of your financial situation. Jeffrey?
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Rebecca has taken you through an in-depth look at the industry and as well as your internal strengths and the weaknesses and the opportunities that some of the opportunities that you face. What I'd like to do is present the analysis that we've done in terms of the numbers. A lot of this built on the forecasts that were provided by Mr. Damsky and that we've had to work with. So what I will do is I will go through and look at a pro forma income statement, pro forma balance sheet, and look at some of the growth potential that you have in terms of revenues. So obviously the income statement that we prepared for 2007, you do face some challenges here. You do face a lot of challenges in terms of your selling and your general administration expenses. This is one of the areas that you might want to work on in the future, and we would recommend that. Obviously, you don't have a huge net income right now, but this is something that you will be able to work on. Obviously, you've made huge investments in the recent few years to build your revenue up to that level with the capacity expansion with that phase 3 of your development. So hopefully you will take advantage of the growing industry strengths that we've seen in the future and build up that net income quite a bit more. In terms of your balance sheet, based on the 2007 revenues and the numbers that we had provided to us, we calculated that your total current assets are close to $8 million US dollars, and your total assets are well over $12 million. So this represents the size of your industry, but there's also a lot of room there to grow. You're obviously going to have to build your asset base if you want to look at further expansion at that 20-25% level, which you've talked about already. Looking at the liabilities, one of the aspects that we have here is a fairly low accounts payable. This is great because, and this is a representative of the low material costs that you have, especially in that Indian industry where you're growing, and also some of the other abilities that you have based on your location. Obviously, your total current expenses, total current liabilities are quite low. This is great for your business right now. Your long-term debt, which we calculated, was approximately $1.7 million right now. So there is opportunities potentially in the future to boost this if you do need to find additional financing. Obviously, your liabilities a total of $1.7 million. Looking further at this balance sheet and at the equity standpoint that you have, obviously, as you know, the two members of the board from the GEM private equity firm own that $3.5 million of the equity in your company. And then the rest is made up of your own personal stake in the company that you've obviously built quite substantially in the last 10 years. When we move further, looking at some of the key ratios that this means, one of them that we really want to keep an eye on is this asset turnover ratio. You need to be using your assets in the right way, and you need to be generating revenues from these assets. Also, your net margin, not huge right now, but your debt ratio is fairly under control, and there is opportunity to expand your debt if you need to finance further expansion. When we look at the potential revenue, when we look at the external funds needed, this is based on the calculations that were provided to us by Mr. Damsky. Obviously, depending on the different scenarios that you target, depending on whether you want to go for that rather conservative growth, a more aggressive growth, and finally on the right, alternative C, which is that really aggressive growth with a really aggressive product mix, looking for great revenue growth of approximately 25%. What we can see here is that there is between $3.5 and $4 million needed if you want to reach that expansion in revenues. Based on these forecasts, these are the revenues and the revenue growth for the next 5 years, leading you to, depending on the situation, on the alternative that you select, on the growth, the aggressive growth strategy that you choose, could be either by 2012 total revenues of $9 million for the less aggressive, for the 5% growth rates, $14 million for the more conservative 15%, and finally for that really aggressive 25%, you could potentially reach $21 million in sales by 2012. So these are a look at some of these targets that you have. The question is, are these targets attainable, and how are you going to reach them? What we've done is we've analyzed these, and I will bring up my colleague Kathleen, who will look at the different alternatives in depth based on some decision criteria, and she will make the recommendation of what we have for you today. So I'd like to welcome my colleague Kathleen.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Before going into the alternatives and evaluate them, let's recall our mandate. Why we are here today? To ride that right wave. And of course, in order to evaluate the alternatives, we need to have some decision criteria, and we do elaborate these for you. The risks, the market potential, the timing right now, and the profitability. The first decision criteria is the profitability. Of course that you need to be profitable in the future, and you need to choose the right level of the growth right now. The second decision criteria is the risk. You need to find the right balance between the growth and the financing part and the investment. The third decision criteria is the market potential. Right now, you need to take into consideration, and our recommendation must focus on the potential of the market, on the Indian market especially, and the timing. We need to take into consideration right now it is the moment of the growth, and right now there is the huge market potential in India. So therefore, we have seen the alternative that you have today. The first one, it would be the sell, and the second one, it would be develop your business. Mr. Samant, as we know you are such a big adventurer, so of course that selling is no option for you. Therefore, we elaborated the alternatives for development, and actually to see the right growth level that you should achieve this year, the 5 next years. The first is to have a growth target of 5% per year. The second is to have a growth target of 15% per year, that's more conservative, and the aggressive growth target of 25% per year for the next 5 years. The first alternative is the growth percent of 5 years. That's the most conservative that you could have. You would not have financing problems, that big financing problems, of course, but you could lose the market potential, and maybe now it is the moment to grow. The second alternative is to get 15% target growth per year. That would balance the growth, the market potential, of course, and the investment that you should make for that. But of course that it would be less revenue. As my colleague Jeffrey was saying, it's around 14 million. And the third alternative is to have the 25% growth target per year. That is going to, of course, provide you with 21 million revenues. But yes, what is going to happen if this forecast, it is not realistic right now? What if the market is not growing today like it was foreseen? So let's see a synthesis of all these alternatives and rank them against these decision criteria. And as you can see, it's a very, very tough decision today that you face. And our recommendation, based on these decision criteria, is to have a more conservative growth rate, 15% per year for the next 5 years. Therefore, our recommendation is to set these growth targets at 15% per year. We don't recommend you today to go for this 25%. We know you, Mr. Saman, that you are such an adventurer and you have this outgoing personality. But please listen today for these financial reasons and be a little bit, maybe for the first time, a little bit more conservative in the life. This strategy, it's safe. Why it is safe for you today? Because it is sustainable by the industry. 15% of growth, you're going to achieve that. That's for sure. It is accessible, yes, because you have great relationship and you do have the possibility of financing for this 15% growth target. It is feasible, of course, in the 5 next years, it is a feasible growth rate. And efficient. Yes, it is efficient because it is for the future. You are using this market potential and it is efficient. Therefore, the benefits of this strategy for you today, as we already said, the qualitative, it's $14 million for 2012. And of course that you're going to balance the right market potential and the investment. But as you know, every strategy is always depending on the implementation plan. The devil is in the details. So I'm going to invite my colleague Ayman to provide you with a strong implementation plan. Ayman?
Thank you, Kathleen. Mr. Santi, we've analyzed and assessed your situation of your company from both a strategic and financial perspective. We've assessed all potential courses of action that your company may undertake and determined the best recommendation plan that suits both your current company needs as well as protects your future assets on the long run. So let's start with the implementation outline. The following dimensions must be considered: the IT perspective, logistics, marketing, lobbying, finance, HR, CSR, as well as production. This implementation plan focuses on the following strategic challenges: what product portfolio that you should have, your capital structure, your supply chain management, as well as your competition. You are working in a very changing environment with respect to law regulations, with respect to competitions that want to go into the Indian market, and you must react to that. So let's start with the implementation timeline. Phase 1 is 3 months. You should really have an immediate reaction. Phase 2 is 1 year long, and phase 3 can go up to 5 years. Phase 1, let's start with phase 1. From a marketing perspective, you should really improve your local network with respect to restaurants within the Indian market, fine dining, by having a free wood display to restaurants, buying in bulk with respect to your wine production, and increase your consumer awareness. It is always beautiful, and people seeing that will increase their curiosity, and it's not very expensive. It's only $5,000 a year, and your local farmers are able to do that, so you don't really have additional costs. Also, from a marketing perspective, the Wine Spectator magazine is very widely known. You should really have more press releases there and participate in international competitions with regards to wine for quality seals as well as international prizes. You really want to have more international recognition. You really want to show that you're a quality company with quality products, so you can focus not only on tourists in the Indian market, but you also want to expand in the long run. Also, you should reach an agreement. You already know that your father has a shipping company. So why not reach an agreement with him to really have all the costs that you have from a logistics standpoint at cost, and all the benefits on the long run will be shared throughout the family. So it's really important to focus on that aspect. Also, from an IT perspective, you do know that the Indian weather is really difficult. You have the monsoon, you really have a dry weather. Why not have a software prediction plan for the weather to really determine the best planting timing, the best picking timing? You really want to make sure that with the current capacity that you have, you want to increase your yield, your productivity. You want to be more efficient. You really have to focus on that, because your competitors are going in and they're already cost efficient. They already know how the market is. They already know they have quality programs. They know how to make sure that they have these quality products with a very short time to market. From a financial perspective, we do know that you're stranded from a financial perspective. So you already have this relationship with the GEM. If you require from an implementation plan any additional funds, you should request it from them. They are stakeholders. They know that there is a great potential in the Indian market. They really want to have, you do have the same interest. You are aligned. So we are sure that $1 million or $2 million will not be a significant amount of money considering the future potential of that market. And if they consider that they don't want to fund you, well, you do have a lot of personal connections, especially in the United States. So you can capitalize on that to really make sure that any implementation costs or expansion costs will be covered. Let's look at phase 2, which is 1 year long. You should build an on-site, on your vineyard, a fine dining restaurant. You already have a good relationship with an architect that already built one of your facilities, Rahul Mehrotra. Really have this nice atmosphere, this nice ambiance to really capitalize on your tourists, capitalize on local groups, to make sure that you really want to promote your product, as well as showing that you are a real quality company. The estimated cost is $200,000 US, and it will really allow you to increase your firm responsiveness with respect to local trends and to your local image. You really want to show that you're a quality company. Since we mentioned that you're going to open a restaurant, you should organize group visits to your vineyard for your local companies. You do know that there is a lot of companies that are outsourcing in the Indian market. There is a lot of Western companies, and really going to them as well as focusing on the tourists will really make sure that you're going to increase your local awareness as well as your international awareness. From a production standpoint, having a continuous quality improvement program. You already have these connections in the US market. You already have this expertise, and you really need to insource it and bring it to India. You really want to make sure that you're going to be able to deliver and really increase your productivity, your yield. You really want to focus on that on the short run as well as on the long run. From a training perspective, you should, since we're mentioning that you want to improve your yield, you need to hire an expert from the US. He has to be Hindi plus English speaking, and he's going to cost $100,000 a year, but we're really sure that this expertise will really be necessary with respect to training your local farmers to really have good practices with respect to picking and with respect to your processing as we've seen in the value chain. And you really want to capitalize on your US connections as well as you reduce your waste. On phase 3, you have to make sure that from a CSR perspective, you do have this wine board. You really want to use it to set industry-wide standards in India with respect to employee working conditions, with respect to their wages. You really want to show to the global community that you are there, that you're committed to not only focusing on your shareholders, but all your stakeholders, your employees. You're there for the long run, and you really want to make sure that you're going to have happy employees to have good products. Also, from a cultural perspective, focusing on that productivity aspect, focusing on increasing your yield and your productivity, having a labor performance program to reward farmers based on their productivity, on kilograms per day, and the number of sealed barrels per day. So, as we mentioned, the phase 1 is 3 months old to react immediately. Phase 2 is 1 year old with the restaurant. And phase 3 is really making sure that you're going to have the CSR campaign, making sure that you're going to be there for the short run, for the long run, and globally expand. So this implementation plan focuses on several aspects, and we're really sure that this implementation plan will really cover all your needs, and you need some key performance indicators. I'm going to call back Rebecca, who's going to give them to you and give you a final wrap of our presentation. Rebecca.
Thank you, Ayman. Mr. Samant, ladies and gentlemen of the board, we have designed some key performance metrics for you in order to monitor the success of the implementation plan that we have presented to you today. We would like you to obviously monitor your inventory turnover. You want to keep those costs low. You should do this on a quarterly basis. You want to look at your asset turnover, specifically because we have this debt to equity issue right now, how you're going to finance your capital structure and the growth that we are promoting to you today. You want to look at your market share and your sales as well. But now that you have a plan of action and a way to monitor its success, we must acknowledge that there are risks with any business strategy. We have addressed these risks and come up with contingency plans in order to mitigate them. What if you don't find the right experts to train the farmers to improve their yield? The contingency that we have come up to mitigate this is that, number one, you have these great relationships, you have international contacts that you can capitalize on to find these experts. Or if this doesn't work out, Terrier Consulting, we will provide you with this service. In addition, the increasing competition, well, with this wine board, you could continue to lobby to discourage the increased prevalence of imports within the market to reduce competition within the industry. Now let's bring back the issues that we set out to address at the beginning of the presentation. We wanted to address the trade barriers, capacity, your product portfolio, your access to natural resources, capital structure, and competition. Basically, our recommendation has addressed each and every one of these issues specifically. Now, in conclusion, we want to build on that competitive advantage, that know-how that you've developed over all these years, and the technology that you developed and your understanding of that technology. And building on that with the growth target recommendation of 15%, which is a little bit more conservative, over 5 years and a 3-phase plan, we're confident that our recommendation will provide these $14 million of revenue per year by 2012, and this is in line with riding the right wave. This concludes the formal part of our presentation. My colleagues Jeffrey, Ayman, and Catalin will now join me to open the discussion and address any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I noticed you touch on the HR issues. The first point, if I understood you correctly, was really the technical training side, training the farmers, etc. The second one, I think the slide was entitled HR culture. I just want to know, with everything that you're recommending, have you thought of, have you discussed, and what can you tell us about the growth in our management structure? What's going to happen to my organization? Because quite frankly, we've been doing reasonably okay up to now, and it just seems like we're going to be growing, left, right, and center.
Definitely. Obviously, with any